Dear Biker, long-time listener, but first time submitting. I've been lurking here for a while, and after hearing so many of these experiences, I figured that it was finally time to share my own weird story. I swear to God, what follows is 100% real, and I still get the chills just retelling it. This happened about 15 years ago in northern New Jersey. A friend and I were riding our bikes from his house to mine. It was around 9:30 or 10 p.m., summertime, and pitch black as we rode down the road. He only lived about 4 houses down, so the ride was maybe 1,500 feet in total. In front of my parents' house is a swamp, literally marked as such on the deed, and there's another swamp directly across the street. We were about 200 feet from my driveway, right at the edge of that swamp, when this thing came out of it, maybe 50 to 70 feet out in front of us. It was tall, at least 6.5 feet, and lanky, with long legs and arms that hung low, almost to the ground. I couldn't tell if it had fur or hair. It was way too dark, and only scattered porch lights from nearby houses to see by. But it walked on 2 legs, mostly. It kind of lumbered out of that swamp like it might sometimes use its front limbs to steady itself as it moved. Still, it was definitely some sort of bipedal, something. Then it stepped into the middle of the street, turns towards us, and lets out this horrible, blood-curdling scream. It sounded like a growl, a hiss, and a shriek all at once. I wish I had it on tape, because there's really no way to describe it or recreate it accurately. After that, it ran across the road into the swamp on the other side. And my friend and I, we nearly did our pants in right there. We did a full U-turn and hauled ass back to his place. After a few minutes, we finally calmed down enough to compare notes, and we had both seen the exact same thing. We had no clue what it was, and we still don't. Eventually, we worked up the nerve to ride back to my house, but we never saw it again. Not that night, and not ever. And for the record, we were 100% sober. We were just kids at the time, not old enough for drinking or drugs. So yeah, that's my weird story. I'd love to know what you guys think. Signed, Rich. Dear Tattooed Biker, something bad happened to me while I was camping. I just don't know what. I'm not sure this fits most of your encounter stories, but I've been holding on to it for 6 years now. It sounds crazy, and honestly, I was told not to talk about it, but I just can't keep it to myself anymore. 6 years ago, I went camping with my now ex-boyfriend. The site we picked was beautiful, tucked deep into the wilderness, and only reachable by some rough trails. We were hiking near paths that led to natural hot springs and a huge waterfall. This was the middle of nowhere. No other people, no cell signal, just the quiet nature. We set up camp by the car and went hiking, soaked in the springs, came back and made dinner. It was all very normal until, the next morning. Before bed, I had put our cooler and a stereo in the car and locked it. I placed the keys in my front pocket of my backpack, and then set the backpack beside my sleeping bag on the far side of the tent. My boyfriend slept closest to the tent door, with his weapon next to him. When we woke up, I felt fine. I'd slept hard. Nothing seemed off until we unzipped the tent. Outside, our campsite looked like it had been attacked. The fire pit was completely trashed. The cooler had been thrown, and food was scattered everywhere. The stereo was smashed and lying under a tree. Every door of the car was wide open, including the trunk. We both just stood there in silence, trying to take it all in. The woods, well, they felt off. What had been beautiful and peaceful the day before now felt cold and wrong. My ex immediately accused me of forgetting to lock the car and said some animal must have gotten into our stuff. Now, I was sure I had locked it. I remembered locking it. I went to the tent to grab the keys from my backpack, but they weren't there. I later found them lying on the ground beside the car. So we threw everything into the trunk and we left there really fast. He was quiet the whole way. Wouldn't even talk about what had just happened. Finally, when we were almost home, he spoke. He told me that he had had a dream that night. Something that was kneeling over him in the tent, holding his gun, just staring at him. When I asked him to explain, well, he clammed up again. Told me he never wanted to talk about it. And he said that I shouldn't talk about it either. But for some reason, I just can't let it go. Something strange happened to us out in those woods, and I just still don't know what. Thanks for reading. Signed, Heather. Dear TB, this happened in early November 2016. At the time, I was moving from Chicago to Philadelphia, and my boyfriend had flown in to help with the drive. After a quick stop at my parents' house in Ohio, we hit the road. We were broke at the time and wanted to avoid tolls, so we had mapped out a toll-free route, about 10 hours total. We had meant to leave early, but got sidetracked, and we didn't leave until 4 p.m. Not that big of a deal. I've done cross-country road trips, hiked parts of the Pacific Coast Trail and the Appalachian Trail solo. The only bummer was missing the Smoky Mountain scenery after dark. Our route dipped in and out of Pennsylvania and West Virginia, specifically areas tied to the Mothman sightings, which I was personally very excited about. At one point, I asked my boyfriend to Google scenic overlooks. I love a good pull-off to admire the stars, especially since, well, I don't get to see a clear night sky living out in the city. He found one and directed me off the highway. I didn't think too much of it at the time, even though most vistas are on the highway, kind of like rest stops. We ended up on a dimly lit road, winding up a mountain base. There was no other cars, and the vibe was just all, well, wrong. I saw a rusted sign pointing toward a scenic lookout, which led us down what looked like a mere service road than anything. It wasn't even paved. The only other road nearby was gated off. The woods were unnervingly quiet. I turned off the music because the silence was somehow louder. Even my radio sounded weirdly amplified, like concert speakers. We drove maybe half a mile in, and the feeling just kept getting worse. So finally I said screw it, and started to do a 3-point road turn to head back. That's when we saw it. A tree had fallen across the road we had just come down. It made no sense. I had only turned around a minute or two ago, and we should have heard a tree fall. After all, it was still dead silent out there. That's when the panic hit hard. We didn't have time to think. My boyfriend jumped out to try and move that tree. I flicked on my brights and scanned the woods. I suddenly felt watched. Now this tree, well, it didn't look old. It wasn't rotting or cracked. It kind of looked like someone had deliberately placed it there. As soon as he stepped out, I locked the doors and I shouted, "I love you." Yeah, I know. Thankfully, he was able to shift the tree just enough for my car to squeeze past. As soon as he was back in, I just floored it. We didn't stop until we were miles away. Now, I'm a very spiritual person. I honestly believe that there are things in the woods that we're just not meant to ever understand. My boyfriend, however, he's an atheist. But let me tell you, that night, even he agreed. There was something out there that didn't want us to leave. Signed, Caroline. Dear Tattooed Biker, this happened about 3 years ago in Big Bend National Park. My friend, my husband, and I had gone on a trip to do some primitive camping. Now, I'm not a hardcore camper, but I've done my share of primitive hiking and wilderness trips, and, well, I like to think that I have decent instincts. I grew up on 8 acres of forested land with coyotes as regular visitors, so I know what common animal behavior and sounds are like. And that's how I'm sure that what we encountered that night wasn't any ordinary animal. We got to Big Bend around 4 p.m. We checked in and set up camp at 9 Point Draw. It's a remote site near the park's entrance. It's about 25 miles from the visitor center and 40 from the Rio Grande village. Basically, we were far from anything that would resemble civilization. After dinner, we planned a short night hike over to a nearby trail. The terrain around our camp was flat desert with sparse ground vegetation, so we thought the hike would be easy enough. To prepare, I scouted the trail earlier in the day, and I marked our route with small rock piles, just to help guide us in the dark. We set out around 10 p.m. Spirits were high at first, but after a few minutes, we started hearing a scuttling noise behind us, maybe 50 feet back. We just chalked it up to some critter. A few minutes later, the sound came again, louder and closer this time, and it sounded like something heavier. Now, there are black bears in the park, but they're usually found further away from this area. And with the landscape being so wide open, our flashlights, well, they should have caught something. But, well, they didn't. We were uneasy, but we kept going. The rock piles were still leading us along. And then I stopped. A wave of pure terror suddenly washed over me. It's kind of hard to describe, but I've heard others reference this kind of thing. Just a deep, instinctual fear. I looked at my husband and my friend, and they looked just as terrified. There wasn't any sound, no wind at all. Even the air felt dead. And just then, out of nowhere, this scream. An inhuman, blood-curdling, echoing scream which seemed to come from all around us. We froze, and, well, those few seconds felt like minutes. Now, I don't remember choosing to run, but suddenly we were all sprinting. We had made it pretty far, and though I tried to follow the path back, I couldn't find the rock piles that I'd placed. I almost turned around thinking we were going the wrong way, but something told me not to. Eventually, I recognized a large rock that I had marked earlier. I ran to it. There should have been a rock pile here. The rocks were there, but they'd all been knocked over. Well, that set off every alarm in my body. I told my husband and my friend that we needed to get back and get back right now. We finally reached the tent a few minutes later. I was completely shaken by the whole experience. I wanted to leave there immediately, and my husband felt the same. But our friend talked us down, saying it must have been just wildlife. So we stayed. That night there were scuttling sounds, and then footsteps circling our tent. I didn't sleep, not for a single second. The next day I hiked back out to check the rest of the rock piles, and every single one had been knocked over. Deep down, I just don't believe that an animal would deliberately walk around just to push over our trail markers. That's what makes me believe that whatever it was didn't mean us well. I don't know what it was out there, and I don't want to know. I'm just glad that we all made it out. Signed, Amber.